Okay. Today we're going to start Membase on the top, 42A. Okay, we thank Hashem. Thank Hashem that we're able to learn every day. It's Chosef learning. We should have the base of English. So today is my mother's birthday. Wow. She's on. I'm not sure. I see someone's on, maybe my father. Okay. Should be healthy. Well, okay. The Mishnah starts. Hamadar hana mechaverai ufnei shvius. So we're familiar with this. Someone takes a vow that his friends shouldn't have any benefits from him, and he takes the vow before shvius. Shvius means shemitah.
It's a bad one, Rabbi.
But no, that's smicha. Shemitah is the 7th year. The 7th year is when you have to leave the land. You can't plow the land, and basically all the fruits in the field become ownerless, and anyone can come in and take. So this person says that his friend can't have any benefits from him. So what happens by the Shemitah? Because he had a property with fruits, and really everyone can go in and take it. Is it with the exception of this person? So it says, he can't go into his field, and he can't take from the nitus would be the plants that are possibly hanging over the sides of the field. He can't take from the fruits, and he can't go into the field. Well, now the complication with this statement, that sounds easy, right?
Yeah.
There's a complication though.
But it says that it's ownerless, so why?
Oh, so 1 second. 1 second. Yeah, you're touching on the point. What the question now here is, can't go into the field, he can't eat the fruits. Does it mean when Shemitah comes, when the 7th year comes, he also can't go in? Or does it mean before the Shemitah? Doesn't tell me. But when I read the next line of the Mishnah, I may have some clue. The next line goes like this. Uvashvius, and on the Shemitah year, any year l'teich sadeyu, aval eichelhum and anatias anitis. On the Shemitah year, he can go into he cannot go into the field, but he can eat from the plants that are hanging over, the trees that are hanging over the side. Okay, now, I have 2 ways of understanding the second line of the Mishnah. One way of understanding is that it's another case. Case number 1 was he took a vow before Shemitah. And the vow takes effect because everything belongs to him. He owns the field, he owns the fruits. He says, my friend cannot have any benefits from me, so the vow takes effect. How long does it take effect? Even on Shemitah, it takes effect. Because the vow took effect when it was before the Shemitah. So he owned it, he could take the vow. What happens when Shemitah comes? The vow is still in effect. But let's say he takes the vow on Shemitah. So the vow never really took effect fully. It only took effect that the person can't go into his field, but to take the fruits are hefker. We're going to see the Gemara is going to ask, what about the field? The field is also hefker. You're allowed. What does it mean? You're allowed to go into the field to take fruits as well on Shemitah, but that's the Gemara is going to ask. But meanwhile, we're taking it for granted that the vow on Shemitah would take effect just for the field, that you can't walk into the property. Remember, we learned before that even Drisas Regel, he can't even walk on his property if he's forbidden by a vow to have benefit. And the fruits don't take effect because he took the vow on Shemitah. It's one possibility. That's going to be the opinion of Rav and Shmuel. We're going to learn the Gemara like this. They're going to learn the Mishnah like this. What's the other way of reading the Mishnah? It's for Geichen or Reish Lakish. You could read the Mishnah like this. Someone takes a vow from his friend. His friend can't have benefit from him. He takes a vow before Shemitah. So before Shemitah, the friend's not allowed to go into the field to take the fruit. On Shemitah, according to Rav and Shmuel, this was case 2. According to Rav Yechanan, it's still the halacha of case 1. And on Shemitah, then he can't go into the field, but he can take the fruit. See the 2 ways of reading this? The question is, if I put a comma or a period after the word hanoitis, I put a period after the word hanaitis on the second line, then line number 3 of the Mishnah is another case.
Right, but
He's taking the vow at a different time. I wonder how the English translates it.
the Talmud doesn't have any.
Doesn't have any
punctuation,
punctuation. I have to punctuate it myself.
right?
And so Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish versus Rav and Shmuel are punctuating the Mishnah differently. Right?
Wow.
Remember that?
No wonder.
Let's eat, kids.
Yeah.
Let's see, kids.
And punctuation saves lives.
You wanna say that?
Well, I'm curious if the English learned it like Rav, or the English, the Rav and Shmuel, or if the English translates it like Rabbi Yochanan. Like, what's the simple? It says over here, and during the sabbatical year when the produce owners may enter. I think they're translating it vague. No, they're translating it like Rabbi Yochanan, because they didn't add into the first, according to Rav and Shmuel, in the first line of the Mishnah, you have to add in that he may neither enter the field nor eat from the produce, even after the Shemitah comes. They don't add that in. So they're learning the Mishnah like Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. That's the simple. That there's 2 cases so far in the Mishnah. He took a vow before Shemitah, or he took a vow on Shemitah. Okay. Another himeno Michael Lefnei Shvius. He says that he can't have food from him before the Shemitah. Yerd l'tzeich sadeh, we can go into the field, but we can't eat from the fruits. But Shvius, but on Shemitah, Yerd v'eichel, you can go down. Now, I assume that the same machlekes Rav and Shmuel would apply to that as well. Is that another case where he took a vow on the Shemitah, or is that the halacha of the first case where he took a vow before Shemitah, and on Shemitah he's allowed to eat the fruits anyway? 2 ways of reading that. You follow?
Mm-hmm.
You lost?
Yeah, that's
No, it's not okay. Let me just explain. Someone takes a vow before the Shemitah that he's not going to give any benefit to his friend.
right.
It means that the friend can't come into his property or eat the fruits. What happens when Shemitah comes? So Shemitah comes, all the fruits become ownerless.
Right.
So according to Rabbi Yochanan and
So
Reish Lakish,
he can't say this when it's
well, he said it before Shemitah. According to Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, as we're going to see in the Gemara, the vow ends by Shemitah because it's not his anymore.
So it's an empty vow.
Well, it will only
But just
linger
like I said,
on
yeah.
for the things that are still applicable, which is walking on the property.
In
But
other
regarding the
words, yeah,
fruits,
or regarding
the
Shemitah
vow's
itself.
over because it's not, he doesn't own it.
So
according to
it has no effect
on the fruits once Shemitah comes.
just the fruits
Yeah.
itself. What about
The
other
property?
produce?
Oh,
Grain.
then we're talking about the grain and the produce,
Okay.
fruits
Oh,
as produce. And according to Rav and Shmuel, then the vow still takes effect, even though Shemitah came and he doesn't own it, because once the vow started, it continues. That's the way the Gemara is going. Okay. Yeah.
I don't understand the idea that, I'm not sure this is really about the mission, but I understand the idea that during Shemitah, you go onto the property for a purpose other than taking fruit. Isn't that the heter?
The heter is just to take the fruit.
Huh?
Yeah. What's going to happen? The Gemara is going to discuss this. That's really the reason why I can't go onto the property is possibly because of other gezeros. He may stay there too long. He didn't really need to go on the property because the fruits were on the edge. The Gemara is going to need to explain it because officially the fruits become ownerless on Shemitah. People are allowed to go on the property and take them. But the way we're making it look is the fruits become ownerless, but the field doesn't. And now you just have to watch them, thinking like, how can I get them? But you can't. That's not true. You're allowed to actually go on the property. That's why over here we're making it that you can't go on the property. So we're saying because there's a vow, that's making it stricter on him because he may linger in the property more than he's supposed to. And take a look at the Gemara. Well, Rav and Shmuel Damri Tavayo. Rav and Shmuel both say there's some complications here in the Girsais, in the textual variants over here, which make it even harder. Nechasim Elu Alecha. We're probably supposed to take that out. Maybe not. Maybe it's supposed to say Nechasai Alecha. Rav and Shmuel both say that if a person takes a vow and says that my property is forbidden to you, my possessions are forbidden to you. So Reuven takes a vow, possessions are forbidden unto Shimon. Lifnei Shvius, he takes the vow before Shvius. Ein yer l'teich sadeyu, can't go into the property. Shimon can't go into Reuven's property. Ve'ein eichel min hanaitis, and he can't go into and he can't take from the fruits that are leaning over. Afal pi she'giya Shvius, even though Shemitah has arrived. That's the way we explained Rav and Shmuel in the Mishnah. What we're doing here is we're putting it back into the Mishnah, that's what the Mishnah means. The imbish Shvius nadar, and if he took the vow on the Shemitah, then the fruits were never his. So we can't say that fruits that don't belong to me are forbidden on you because it's not even his to make that vow. So
Reminds me of like chametz in a way.
right, it's very similar to chametz, where a person can make it ownerless once it becomes prohibited. It's too late, right? Well, but over here we have a rule that you can't, if it's not in your possession, then you can't make it forbidden on someone else. You can make it forbidden on yourself. I can say that so-and-so's produce is prohibited to me, but I can't say so-and-so's produce is prohibited onto Shimon. So here, the produce isn't his because it became ownerless, because it's hefker. So we can't say that that produce is prohibited onto Shimon.
And the owner can't take any of the produce
On
from
Shemitah? He's allowed to take it, but only as a guest. It means he can't bring it into his house and store it. He can go out into the field and take what he needs for the,
Okay, so it's not.
Rabbi Yochanan v'Reish Lakish Damri Tavayu, Nichsei Alecha, Nechasai Alecha. Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish both say, my property is prohibited unto you. If this is what Reuven says. See, if he says my property is forbidden unto you, you have to realize that he's only making it forbidden while it's his property. So what's going to come out now is that there's really two issues that we're dealing with here. One issue is he put a stipulation in there. My property is prohibited unto you. That would mean that only while it's mine. If it wouldn't be mine, then it's not prohibited.
It would be an empty vow, no, because you can't prohibit something that's not yours.
That fits with the
No,
Mishnah.
but he's prohibiting it while it's his. But at the point when it becomes not his, at Shemitah, then the vow's over because there was a stipulation there how long it's supposed to last, only while it's his. But that's not what we're dealing with here. That's just here to confuse you. What we're really dealing with is that can a person take a vow, whether he puts a stipulation in there or not, can he take a vow that his property is prohibited on someone else and then continue that vow, have the vow continue even after it's not his? Does he have rights over it beyond his ownership? The question here is, beyond his ownership, does he still have rights over it? Because he took the vow beforehand, not the stipulation in the vow when he limits it to only when he owns it.
How about when he dies?
That's exactly when he dies. If he says, my property is prohibited unto you, this is Reuven talking, then Reuven dies. So
He writes it in his will. No.
right. So then after he dies, he said, my property. Now it's not his property, it went to the inheritors. So then that would be a stipulation. But again, Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish are not dealing with that stipulation. That's the fact that that's coming in is when he says nechasai alecha, my property on you. They don't even really mean to say that. They mean to say much more than that. They mean to say nechasim, property, nechasim elu, these properties. Not that there's a stipulation only on it's all it says. They mean to say that these properties should be prohibited onto Shimon. Reuben is saying that. So what happens? Let's take a look. Lefnei Shvius, before the Shemitah, ein yer l'teich sadeo v'nechel min anaitis. Well, it's his and he has rights to it. Before the Shemitah, Shimon cannot take from go into the field and he can't take from the fruits. Higia Shvius, but once Shemitah comes, ein yer l'teich sadeo aval eichlo asanaitis. Once Shemitah comes, then Shimon can take from the fruits because they're not his. Reuben has no rights over it at that point. His arm doesn't extend beyond when it's not his anymore. Yeah.
They do belong to you. It is your.
Well, they belong to you equally to other people. You eat it, you share it together with everyone else, and anyone can come in and take it.
I would suspect that, let's just say, 10 trees on your farm, you need one tree worth of fruit to live. Anyone could have come and eat your 10 fruits. They'd have to say, no, this belongs to the owner.
I don't think so.
No, it's yours to share.
Yeah, you eat it together with everyone else.
You, the owner, have the right to eat from your field. And
You have the
provide for your
right.
family.
Yeah.
How are you going to eat from your food? The mob showed up and ate up
Problem.
You can't store it, you can't hide it. You
everything.
just starve along with
We're
everybody else.
talking about the
It doesn't
Shemitah.
doesn't seem like people's right trumps your right.
You're equal with everyone else. You get the produce together with everyone else.
Well, you're closer.
Yeah, you are
It's in your
closer.
backyard.
You are closer to it.
First come, first serve.
Yeah, you do get to it first.
You have to
Why
share.
can you only eat from the ones that are leaning out? Because you can't walk? What if somebody else
The
took
property.
something from them? But what
No,
if somebody else
anyone
gave
can
them?
go on the property. Anyone really is allowed to go on the property in Shemitah. That's the rule of Shemitah, that the land becomes ownerless as well. But it only becomes ownerless for the rights to the fruits. You can't go live on the property. It's ownerless that anyone can walk on it to get the fruits.
Can't dig for gold on it.
Right, you can't start digging.
But if
you can
somebody
go-
else took the fruit from the middle of the property, gave it to
That-
him,
Yeah, that's allowed. Oh, so it would go, you're saying that it switched owners in the middle. Yeah, so
yeah,
that
or
would
I mean,
that would probably be a difference between if you said nechasai or if you said nechasim elu. Said
mhm.
nechasim elu. That may also be a different. Nechasim elu means these possessions as opposed to my possessions. My possessions is the stipulation, which officially here we're not talking about. Right here, that's just here to confuse you. What we're really talking about, the Machlekes Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish, is how long does the power of a person taking a vow, can that extend even after it's not his? They can't prohibit something that's not mine on someone else, but because when I prohibited it was mine, and then it becomes not mine, but does the vow that I already took beforehand continue on?
The vow may take effect after the Shemitah year also.
Go back after the Shemitah. Yeah, that's what it would seem.
So to get the argument straight, Rav and Shmuel say that if you take the vow before the year of Shemitah, it extends into Shemitah year.
Yeah.
And Reish Lakish and
Yochanan
Yochanan
says,
disagree.
right.
Besides being totally confused here. But this seems to remind me of the whole Indian with the wife, whether she's an illicit, the son that inherits all the son who has karka, and he's allowed to have only the fruits, but he has no it seems like almost the same machlokas, and then whether or not she has to, or she inherits fruit, she has to sell the fruits, buy land. Because you have a situation there where the person owns the land, but the husband can only
Right.
get the payers, and there's a lot of demarcations in when you can't
Right,
get.
right.
I mean, but I don't remember who argues.
That was over there. That was discussing the ownership of the husband in just having the rights to take the fruits.
Just doesn't that sound like
But over
people
here-
have the rights for the fruit?
Yeah, over here, I think what we're really discussing is what is the nature of the vow? Is the vow something that he owns and that he's able to prohibit? Or is the vow, doesn't have to do with his ownership, it has to do with the item. And when he takes the vow, something changes in the item, and even if it's not his anymore, it's still lingering on that item. In other words, if you look at it as consecrated, so it would seem that you consecrate it. What happens to it if it? Well, actually, we learned something that you consecrate an item that you only owned until the yovel, when the yovel comes. So what happens then? We had like it came up on something like that.
He also consecrated his wife in marriage, and then the whole situation is identical. But Kadeshusly is almost the same as a nether.
Right.
It's a lot of similarities.
Right.
But
Okay. So lema b'hakamiflagi. Let's say that this machlekes in how to learn the Mishnah, if you put a period after ve'inaychel min anaitos, if you put a comma there, and and afterwards goes the halacha. But let's say that that's a machlekes. The Rav Shmuel Sabri, Rav and Shmuel hold that a person can make something prohibited if it's in his possessions, and that will continue even after it leaves his possession, which means Shemitah, when it becomes ownerless. And Rabbi Yechon and Reish Lakish say that a person cannot make it prohibited for after it leaves his possession. He only has the rights over it while it is. Yeah. Now,
this is an argument between those in Eretz Yisrael and those in Babel.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
Shemitah really only applies to Eretz Yisrael. So I would put more credence on Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish.
Fine.
Who are at the action.
Fine. Usually, I think the halacha is like Rabbi Yochanan over Rav and Shmuel anyway.
Oh, good.
I think so. Yeah. Even if he's arguing with both of them, I think. Definitely when he's arguing with one, I think even of both. But that could be a machlekes. The Bavli was written after, but Rabbi Yochanan is still very influential in halacha.
The reason that I was wondering, the vow doesn't take effect, like if it's against what the Torah like prescribed. That's the
Right.
reason why this vow like breaks.
No.
this deal.
It doesn't have to do with the vow against something that says in the Torah. If he would take a vow, if he would take an oath against something that says in the Torah was a problem. I will not put on tefillin. That would be an oath. But if he says that these tefillin are prohibited to me, which is a vow, then it does take effect. Or even if he says all tefillin is prohibited to me, it would take effect. Because that's on the object, that's not on the action. Yeah, that's what we learned before. That was the difference. Here it doesn't really have to do with not allowing someone to take the Shemitah fruits, which that officially that's he has rights to that in Shemitah. It doesn't have to do with that halacha. This is a forbidding an object, which won't affect the halacha.
So that's going back to the first line of the Gemara. You said whoever changes Nakasim to Nakasi.
Yeah.
That's a kind of a big deal.
It is a big deal. And what the Ran does is he says afterwards, he says, don't think that when Rabbi Yechon and Reish Lakish say nechasai alecha, that they only mean nechasai. They actually mean nechasim. And then the Ran goes through why it has to be like that. It says, it says if it would be nechasai, then the Mishnah would be telling me nothing, because the stipulation would take over, and then they're not telling me anything about the power of the vow to extend longer than his ownership. The stipulation in the vow itself would be taking effect. It's only prohibited while it's his. Once it's not his on Shemitah, then it doesn't take effect. So you don't need to, you're not telling me anything by saying that the vow doesn't take effect when Shemitah comes. The only way you'd be telling me something, a chiddush, something interesting, would be if you didn't say my property is prohibited. If you said this property is prohibited. Now what you're saying is not that there's a stipulation in the vow. You're saying that it's the extent of how far the vow can reach beyond his ownership.
So if he didn't put the stipulation that it was his, it would take effect? Like if
Even,
his
yeah.
properties-
Well, that's going to be, if he doesn't put a stipulation, he just says, these properties are prohibited unto you, Reuven tells Shimon. So will it take effect during the Shemitah? That's a machlekes Rav and Shmuel versus Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish. That's what we're discussing.
I don't really see why they have to contradict, right? But Rav and Shmuel is just not saying anything about the other case. Right? They could both be true.
That's true. The Gemara in the end is going to say that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But it takes a while to get there.
Understand Rav and Shmuel's point. If it's ownerless, then anyone can have benefit.
Right.
So
Right. What Rav and Shmuel are saying is that if you have some property, right, and it's yours, and then you take a vow that someone can't have any benefit from your property. But let's say you don't say your property, you say from this property. And then you give it to someone else. What happens to that vow? Well, if you said my property, then you made a stipulation, and then it's not your property anymore. So
Right,
you
yeah.
only said, if you said this property,
right.
then it could still continue. Depends on the language there. Okay, so now let's take a look. B'tizbara. Do you really think that this is possible?
By the way, sorry, but if you ever walk the Magen David, right, and you go to that little side street that's not a street,
Six.
on one,
Yeah. And
on
Sixth Court.
172nd,
Right.
whatever, it's not a
Right.
street, it's a backyard in the backyard. I never wonder why there is no street there. It's never been continued. It's because this case, the city made a covenant, or whatever the term is,
Yeah.
that whoever buys that old house property, the one that's like Day County Pine, whatever, which nothing's
church or
happening on
something.
it ever. If they do any improvements, and that's why no one said, have to pay to the city to make a street there. The same Michigas that's going on 175th.
Oh.
So because that's insanely expensive to do the electric, the water, the whole thoroughfare, no one's ever improved that property there. So it can change hands several times, which it has, people buying it, and then they find out, oh, I can't do anything with the property unless I'm going to give the city all this money. And so
Wow.
that's why there's no street there.
The Tizbara, do you really think so? Is there really anyone that holds that a person cannot make something prohibited after it leaves his possession? A question on Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish. Imkain, probably supposed to be the Imkain. Yeah, because if so, Niflagi ben Achasim Elav, Akolshkim ben Achasai. Look at the words of Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish. They said my property. They didn't say these properties. If they wanted to tell me that it's actually prohibited because you can't make it prohibited after it's out of his reach, after it's out of his possession, then why they say my property? My property is misleading. My property makes it look like there's a stipulation there. The Sue, and even more, and furthermore, Hatanan, we have a Mishnah. The other that a person can take a vow that something should be prohibited even after it leaves his possession. The Tanan, the Mishnah goes like this. Someone tells his son that you can't have any benefit from me. My possessions are like a sacrifice. Mace, if when the father passes away, Yerushenu, he can inherit him. He's not having benefit from him because it's not his anymore. Father passed away. The Torah gives the property over to his son, not having benefit from the father. It's not the father's. But if he says, if he says that during his lifetime and after, he clearly says, after his death, if he passes away, then he can't inherit him. The Quran speaks out that it doesn't mean that he doesn't inherit him. He inherits him, he just can't have benefit from it. But why does it say he doesn't inherit him? Because to make it symmetrical to the first case where it says he does inherit him. Here it says he doesn't. It means that he inherits, but it's still prohibited. Well, what just happened? We see that a person can make something prohibited even after it leaves his possession. Over here, he was able to do this because he clearly stated what the vow means. So what now is we've reached one point that originally we thought, according to Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish, it was impossible to make it prohibited after it leaves his possession. Forget about any stipulations. It's impossible because it's not his. Now we're saying, no, it is possible. And that depends on this language. If he says clearly that it should be prohibited even after it leaves his possession, then it would be prohibited, like he did over here.
It would be the same if he says you're not allowed to have benefit from this property.
No. It's only when he
What
says
if
even after it leaves.
No, but if he didn't say out of my property, if
Right.
he says this property, the same thing.
We didn't say that yet. So far, we're only saying that if he clearly specifies even afterwards, that would be like somewhere in the middle. I think the Ran mentioned that. Yeah.
Like it's removing the stipulation that like possession.
Right. Yeah, but I think it may be one step further. He has to actually say. You see, when he says, he's saying the Chasim Elu. Let's take a look. 1 second. Mikol Makom Kasha. Nevertheless, we have a question.
What does that mean? He has inherited, but he has no.
So he owns it, but he can't have benefit from it.
So what does he own? Was it non-qualifying shares? I mean, what does he own? He can't have any benefit from it. Can't sell it. Can't do anything. Did it cut down?
I don't know what he does with it. He can't have benefit from it.
Or does it cut? Let's say there's 5 Yorshim. Since he owns 1/5, the others each get 1/5. Whereas if we said he didn't own it, they
Right.
get 1/4. But
Right.
the other stuff stays in limbo.
Right. Exactly.
That's really crazy.
Okay. So, but nevertheless, we have a question because why didn't they argue about Nechasim if Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish really hold this? Why? Oh, very nice. Why didn't they argue about?
Needed you.
Why didn't they argue about nechasim? Why were they arguing? Why were they saying the rule by nechasai? Nechasai means my property as opposed to these properties. If it has to do with taking the vow, the vow should continue even after his ownership. So then why weren't they arguing about these properties, which that would be clearly that discussion? Ella, rather, the Gemara says, everyone agrees that if he says these properties, that the vow does continue, like you were saying. The whole machlekes if he says my property. Rav Shmuel Savri leishna nechasim elo leishna nechasai. Adamaiser. Doesn't matter if he says my property or if he says these properties. After it leaves his possession, according to Rav and Shmuel, it's still prohibited. Rabbi Yochanan, Reish Lakish Savri, nechasim. What's the aleph here? Nechasim elu, these properties, adamaiser. A person can prohibit for more than he owns it. But nechasai ain't adamaiser. But if he says my property, then it doesn't go any further than his ownership. Once his ownership ends, like by Shemitah, then it's going to be over. Gemara asks, is there really an opinion that accepts this view of Rav and Shmuel? Or can Rav and Shmuel really say this? That even if he puts a stipulation on it, that it's my property that's prohibited, that it will still be prohibited even if it's not his property, because it changed hands? Does anyone really hold that? But we have a Mishnah. Someone says to his friend, this is a slight difference here. You see, there's two guys here. There's Reuven and Shimon. Reuven is telling Shimon that you can't have any benefit from my property. Now, what we were discussing is, let's say Reuven's property becomes not his property. So he sells it, it becomes hefker because of Shemitah, all of that. What happens to Shimon? Does he then have the rights to it? But let's say it works the other way. Let's say Shimon tells Reuven, I'm not going to have any benefit from your property. Then all I'm dealing with is the stipulation of your property. I'm not dealing with the ownership rights that Reuven has over it to make the vow even after it's not his. All I'm dealing is with, did Shimon make the stipulation? See, depending on who's making the vow here, becomes very clear, very defined. What's my discussion? So here, what we just did is we just switched. Someone tells his friend, Shimon tells Reuven, I'm not going to go into your house. Your house is like a sacrifice to me. Yeah, I'm not dealing anymore with ownership. I'm dealing with the stipulation that
Curse on it in a sense.
well, he said it's only while it's his. Shimon is saying into your house, your field that I would buy. He said he's not gonna buy it. Let's say Reuven now dies or he sells it. So mutter. Then Shimon can now go in because it wasn't his anymore. Let's say he says this house I'm not gonna go into. This field doesn't say your field, it says this field that I'm not gonna purchase. If the Reuven dies or if he sells it to someone else, then it's aser, because Shimon took the vow not based on, there was no stipulation in the vow that house, not going into that house, I don't care who owns it. It was on the object. So how could we say that Rav and Shmuel say that it doesn't matter if he says nechasai or nechasim, both of them would continue to be prohibited. Nechasai, we have clearly a Mishnah that says that it can't continue because there's a stipulation there. Ella, the Gemara says, Kiamri Rabbi Yechon Reish Lakish b'nechasai, Rav Shmuel b'nechasamelo b'lei pligi. See, Rabbi Daniel, there's actually no machlekes here. Depends what the expression was. Rabbi Yochanan is talking about where, I guess, back to the case of the Mishnah, where he said nechasai, my property, nechasai, my rhymes with my property, the possessive. So that would be prohibited only while he owns it, and it stops by the Shemitah. But Rav and Shmuel are saying that he said nechasimelu, these properties, and if that's the case, then it doesn't stop at the Shemitah. So the truth is, you do have two ways of reading the Mishnah, depending on what was the person's statement. But then there's no machlekes in din, because each one would agree that if he said the other statement, then the halacha would be different. The question is, what was the statement of the Mishnah? That I have two options. But in the psak, there's no machlekes. Okay, now let's go to the one more piece that we mentioned, is that he can't walk into the property. In Shemitah, he can't go into the property because he took a vow. The vow was that Shimon can't have benefits from Reuven, which means that continues even over the Shemitah. Maybe he took it on the Shemitah, depends how you want to read it. What does it mean? What's the difference that he's allowed to eat the fruits that are hanging over? Because these are ownerless. Aranami afkare. We know the rule by Shemitah that the property also becomes ownerless. People are allowed to go in there and take fruits. Why are you saying you can't go in? Amar Ula ba'im de milana salad bulan. Ula says we're talking about where the fruits are on the border. You're only allowed to go in to get the fruits, but you can't just go in for no reason. And here the trees are on the border. So why is he going in? The produce is ownerless, but that also gives you the rights to go into the property to get the produce. But if the produce is right at the edge of the property, then you don't have rights to go in. And that's what we're saying, that he doesn't have rights to go in, because the going in now is not to get the produce.
But you have normal rights to that fruit anyway. That's property.
But here, because he took the vow, he can't take that. Oh, here on Shemitah, he can't prohibit those fruits if he takes the vow on Shemitah.
And during the year, he can't prohibit the fruits
During the other 7 years,
lying over the property line,
Yeah.
like going onto a swale. Or
Yeah.
something. I thought anything that's on the swale, you could take. If it falls
I think if
down.
it falls, but he took the vow when it's supposed there. I don't know when it falls. That's an interesting question. What's the rule in American law? Can you take anything that's hanging over someone's fence? Hanging over the sidewalk. Can I pick mangoes hanging over the sidewalk? The tree, the base of the trunk of the tree is on someone's private property.
I know when I first moved to Florida and lived on 47th Street, and Graham, or whatever his name was, lived across the street in a giant mansion. He had a phenomenal grapefruit tree that leaned over, and the grapefruits all fell. And when I parked my little Alfa Romeo, I used to pick up the grapefruits.
Yeah, if they fall, then I assume it's on the sidewalk, but I don't think you can take them.
In America,
I can
the
see
general
that.
rule is you own property,
Raymond,
you own from the ground up to the sky.
Okay.
Grapefruit
There's
tree.
a virtual vertical extension. So in most of the places, you have a right to deal with something that's on your property, that's on your property.
But let's say it's hanging over to
That's what I'm
the
saying.
sidewalk.
No, You're allowed to deal with what's hanging over, because that's your property. Now, there are limitations. You can't do it in a way that destroys what's on his property.
Oh, I get what you're saying. So the neighbor can take the fruits even though he doesn't have the trunk,
Right.
because
It's
it hang
on
over his property. Okay.
It's in his airspace.
Uh-huh.
Where it's on public property. It's not public and push the fruit.
Then
It's on
anybody-
public property.
But if the trunk is on private property and the fruits are on the public,
It's the same rule.
Private
you can take it before it falls.
Something was
Only certain people in this neighborhood go and actually pick it when no one's looking. I would just wait till it falls.
You're gonna lose out on all those good mangoes.
No, they would break it.
Grapefruits.
Only when they fall under.
Okay, Amarula.
Everybody under the bus except for you.
Who's over?
And let me finish over here. Reb Shimon ben Al Yaakov Amar Gzer Shem Yeshe B'Amida. This last opinion we mentioned before, we have a concern now that maybe he's going to delay while he's inside. And because he took a vow that he can't really have benefit from him, so he'd really only be allowed to go inside to get the fruits. But we were concerned that he may go inside and delay. So why'd we say before that when you can visit the sick, you're allowed to go in, but you can't sit down? Because normally when you visit the sick, this person sits down. But here, because he's standing, he's going to remember that he should not delay. But over here, there is no other way of picking fruits other than standing. So when you usually don't pick fruits sitting. So when you go into the property, there's nothing to remind him that he shouldn't delay. So therefore, even the standing is a problem. By the visiting the sick, the standing was fine because usually you sit. So yeah, but over here, he's going in and he's standing, he may delay. And that's why we say that he can't go in.
Wow.
Okay, let's leave this here.
Thank you. Not only
Yeah,
fantastic. Scary.
your
John,
Well,
Thank you.